Hello and welcome to Thursday Thoughts. Thursday Thoughts? What on earth are they, I hear you ask? Well, my friend Lucy and I meet every week over on Instagram to talk all things personal growth because she is as obsessed with it as I am. And we decided that we might as well put those conversations out as a weekly podcast. So now you can listen to us chat here on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we'll be talking about topics such as spirituality, limiting beliefs, the ego, imposter syndrome, gratitude, meditation, confidence, and so much more. So if you're ready, here we go. Anyway, on to today.
Yes. So basically this was, you suggested doing this for our live, and weirdly I did a podcast about this about 2 or 3 weeks, a mini-sode about it 2 or 3 weeks ago, but we'll see if I can remember anything that I said in mini-sode. But do you want to just introduce it?
Yeah. Okay, because I came up with this. I wanted to talk about Overwhelm only because I seem to have a couple of clients at the moment who are really in this cycle of overwhelm. And so I've been kind of thinking a lot about overwhelm and how best to really get out of it. Because when you're in that state of overwhelm, it can be so debilitating. And I think, I suppose what is overwhelm? For me, what it means is when you just have so many things going on often in so many different parts of your life, that you just don't even know what to tackle first, you don't know what to do. And actually what ends up happening is that you end up just having a big old panic and not doing anything at all. You kind of almost freeze. It's like you go into that fight, flight, freeze mode. I think we often forget about that freeze part, which is that sort of stress response when we don't actually take any action whatsoever, and then we just procrastinate. And it can be such a horrible feeling, and you don't know how to get out of it. So, and for me, the people who I work with often are sort of at that really busy stage of life, midlife, and often they've kind of been pulled in all directions. Work can be seriously busy. Your parents are getting older, so you're being pulled in that direction. You may well have kids, and they're sort of either younger or teenage kids, and that has all those challenges. Whatever it is you're doing in life, that there are so many segments to it, and so that is why I think, firstly, the first thing really which we need to understand is what are our priorities.
Yeah.
And that, and as difficult as kind of, sometimes it's like, well, I don't know, I just need to get something done. But actually it's like, well, what do we need to prioritize first? So for me, when I work with people, actually, I kind of often, that's what we really start to think about, what are your values? What's important to you? Where do you want to put your focus first? And then we can kind of start to look at it from there. After you've kind of, in the moment, obviously, though, there's, also, I'm just bringing to mind one client, in the moment, it's very easy to go in that very downward spiral and you to go into that freeze mode. So, with how we've just been really working on in those moments, you just need to pause, take a breath.
Literally
Take a breath. And actually the best breath for this is something called the physiological sigh, which I bang on about it because it literally will shift your state in moments. So that is literally 2 breaths in, like 2 sniffs in, and a big sigh out, a long sigh out. And that will just help you get a moment of clarity to just go, okay, to take a step back and actually remove yourself from that real what the hell am I doing moment.
Yeah, completely. No, it's so true, isn't it, how you can get to the point where you're just so overwhelmed that you, like you say, you just freeze and you don't do anything. And my gosh, I can relate to this big time. And in fact, one of the things that I mentioned on the mini-sode that I did about overwhelm is the fact that it's just one of the, in fact, I heard this from, Marie Forleo, who I absolutely love. She's brilliant. And I started doing this thing where I actually say out loud, even if it's just to myself, I don't do overwhelm, because I think the first thing, or one of the first things to think about, is the way that we are actually speaking to ourselves or other people about how overwhelmed we are. Because I always used to, and I still do sometimes, but I used to have such a bad habit, especially in the last couple of years, because I've had quite a lot going on and it's all felt a bit overwhelming. But I had got into this really bad habits of just being like, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed, you know, talking to people, like talking to my sister and saying, fuck, I'm just so overwhelmed and I don't know what to do. And I'm just repeating, I'm so overwhelmed. And actually, we have to be really mindful of the words that we're using, because our words, in the same way that our thoughts are creating our reality, our words are also having a massive effect on our reality. So the first thing I would say is to try and stop talking about the fact that you're really overwhelmed, either to yourself or to anyone else. And again, to go back to the thing that Marie Forleo says, which is, I don't do overwhelm. Because when you say out loud, I don't do overwhelm, it's just somehow it just kind of calms you down and it just gets you into a better space. So that would be the first thing I'd say. And secondly, I would say that one of the things, obviously, when you've got like a massive to-do list, and I always, like, I write things down. I have my big like A4 planner that I write everything down. And one thing that I've realized that I do is I will, because I have a planner. I deliberately got a planner that has like half-hour segments throughout the day, so I can literally block out, you know, 9 to 10, 11 to 11:30 or whatever throughout the day. And what I tended to do, I'm trying to be better, but what I tended to do was basically stuff way too much into a day. And I'd be like, 9 to 10, I do that. 10 to 11, I do that. 11 to 1, I do, you know, and when you put more into your diary than you actually are feasibly capable of doing, because you've got to allow for, I might just need to go to the loo, or I might just make a cup of coffee, or I might just want to walk around the block for 15 minutes. So I would say be realistic about what you actually can fit into a day, because otherwise it doesn't help the overwhelm, because you put loads of stuff into a day, half of which you don't get done, and then that just makes you feel even worse. So that's one thing. And then another thing that I would say is, basically, there are those, you know how there are always those things, and I use my inbox as an example of this. So I can sometimes have loads of emails in my inbox, and I'll look at it and I'll just go, oh my God, there's just so many emails and I've got to reply to them all like now. And there's just loads of things to action, and I get in a real panic just looking at my inbox. But I would say, I bet you that most of us, there are little things that are part of that kind of quote unquote overwhelm stuff, but there, within all of those things that we've got to do that we're overwhelmed by, there are tiny little things that are going to take not as long as we think they're going to take. And what I would say is just take half an hour or an hour to just bust through those little things, because ultimately, if you've got 20 emails in your inbox and you're having a panic attack going, shit, I mean, 20 might not sound very much to some people, but anyway, whatever is a lot to you, if you just take half an hour or an hour and just go through and do those things that you can do in like 5 minutes or 10 minutes, because when you get those things out of the way, then that immediately clears, you know, that sort of clears your headspace to then start tackling some of the bigger tasks. So I would just say, there are always going to be things that aren't going to take you as long as you think. And if you, rather than panicking and not doing anything, just get those little things done that are only going to take you 5 minutes, and before you know it, you've cleared like 15 emails and you immediately feel better.
A very quick break to ask you to hit the follow or subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you're enjoying this episode, I'd be super grateful if you could hit those stars and rate it too. Thank you.
Yeah, I with that's so true. And I think also you have to, which I need to get much better at, it's about putting boundaries around the fact that you've then done that job, rather than then checking your emails kind of at a sort of another moment at a time where you're actually meant to be doing something else. And then you notice there's something there which needs responding to kind of soonish. So you kind of get sidetracked and you end up spending ages of time doing that. And actually that can wait till, you know, you need to kind of schedule that in and do that when you've actually got time to respond, because that's sometimes where I can get veered up, you know, I can veer off onto a different tangent. It's like, oh God, I was meant to be doing this and now I've ended up doing this. And that's really, you know, it's really annoying. And also I was going to say, back on the subject of your language, when you were saying about I don't do overwhelm, that's just such a good example of really detaching from the state that you are. And I'm sure we've said this before, maybe when we talked about anxiety or other states which you don't want to be in. When we fuse ourselves with that state, we're actually, you're more likely to become it. But actually, when you're saying something like, I don't do overwhelm, or even sort of simply, I am experiencing overwhelm. I prefer I don't do overwhelm, because it's kind of going, I'm not doing it. But it's not I'm overwhelmed. It's not like I'm anxious. It's like I'm experiencing anxiety. So you are not the anxiety. You are detaching from it, and it's quite subtle, but actually it can really change the way that your brain perceives what you're feeling. You need to detach from it, and then you can kind of move through it and let it go. And that's what we want. We want to kind of let it go and not be stuck within it. But yes, what else? What were you? And there was something else you said which I was going to say, and I can't remember.
I was going to just respond to something that you said about how you get distracted by emails. And it's so weird, because literally yesterday, I was working last night, and exactly for this reason, and I think this is a really good idea. You know how your emails kind of pop into the side of your screen like that?
Oh, I don't have that. I don't have it on.
Well, I did have that on until literally yesterday. By complete coincidence, I actually turned that off, because I, exactly the same as you, like you say, you answer those emails and someone replies, and then you get completely diverted from the thing that you were meant to be doing. So for anyone who does have those email notifications on, just turn them off, because sitting with like a Word document open, or whatever it is that you've got open on your computer, if you can't actually see all the new emails coming in, then it really helps. Because I find that if I see one coming in, I cannot resist just looking at it. And like you say, there's 15 minutes gone, because you get sidetracked into doing something else.
Exactly.
One thing.
Oh, sorry.
No. Go.
Thing. So one thing which I've started to do, and actually I've been working with someone on this, is when you have so many different areas. So this person I'm thinking of had, just moved home, got a new job, has some health issues, needs to do some self-care, has I don't know, she just had so many different things going on, that what we decided to do, and I just think this is a really good exercise, is actually in those different areas of your life, have a heading for each of those different areas. And this is if you are extremely overwhelmed and there's so much you've got to go on, and literally break them down into the smallest actions for each step. And this, is going to take you a little bit of time. Oh, I've slipped down a bit. This is going to take you a little bit of time to actually list everything out. But I think when you can actually see every action you need to take, and you're right, it's not about doing the massive things. I think actually when we realize that it's all the small little steps which kind of lead to the bigger action, which are important, and actually those are the things we need to be focusing on, the small steps rather than the big thing. Because for example, just doing a podcast, if I just was to write on my list, record podcast episode, I mean that is ridiculous, because there are so many parts to that. There are so many parts. It's about finding a guest, it's about preparing for doing the research for the interview, it's doing the interview, it's then editing the interview, it goes on. There's so many parts of it. So actually it's about breaking every big step down into as many little things as possible, and then you can start to prioritize. Right, at the beginning of the day, I'm slipping again. At the beginning of the day, what are the things I just have to do today? And actually realistically we should just try and set ourselves 3 things which have to be done today. And I'm sure that there's unless there's obviously anything else which is majorly urgent, but just give yourself maybe no more than 3 things which have to get done, and anything else you do after that is a complete bonus. And so you kind of get that sense of achievement of I've done it, and so you can just, that can really help your nervous system just to stay calm and not get into that kind of complete panic mode.
Yeah, totally. One other thing actually is I think it's a good idea to start with all the shitty stuff that is like boring or annoying, or the things that basically start the day with the things that you don't want to do, and get them done. Like that's a really big one, because I just find that I can have a tendency to put off the thing the hardest thing, the thing that's going to require the most kind of brain power, the thing that I'm just like, oh God, I just don't, I'm procrastinating about it. But if you tackle those things first, then, it's all up here. It's all sort of, the only way is up after that, once you've got the worst. And again, it's like whether it's the most boring thing or the most difficult thing, but I guess the thing that you're least excited about, do that first and then it's done. And also, I think you also sort of need to really ask yourself, because I can be like, oh my God, I've got to do this, and I've got to do this, and I've got to do this. And then when I actually sit down and look at it, I'm like, Lucy, you don't need to fucking think about that particular thing for another week. You don't need to think about that for another week. So just make sure that you are being honest with yourself and realistic, about what actually you have got to get done today. Because if you're worrying about things that you don't even need to start for another 2 weeks down the line, then that's one thing you can cross off your list. But I think certainly for me, I have a tendency to just look at everything that doesn't all need to be tackled today. But when you do that, it just makes you feel worse. So just really ask yourself, what do I need to get done now or this week? And I think, like, I always, on a Sunday, for example, I always look at my diary for the week, because, like I said earlier, I have this planner and I put everything in my diary. So every day I look at it and I know what I've got to do. And things shift and change, which is why I always write it in pencil so I can rub things out. Little tip. But yeah, I on a Sunday, I will look at the week ahead, what I've got to do, because I think there's a lot to be said for really just knowing and being prepared and just knowing what you've got to do. And then I just look at, I have my diary open, this planner open all the time on my desk, basically. So yeah. What were you
I think a big problem is, and I'm talking from myself here, is that still I kind of believes at some point that I'm going to get to the end of my list, at my end of my to-do list, and that is kind of almost what we're all searching for, is that moment of going, now I can relax because I've got to the end of the list. And the reality is, we're never, ever, ever going to get to the end of our to-do list. And I think the sooner that we can really understand that, the better, and we've got to just live with that sort of uncomfortable feeling that we're always going to have loads of stuff to do. It's just reality of life. And so, as you said, some things really aren't important now. I mean, I must admit, though, I've had some things on my list, which they really need to get done. But things, to do with the house, we've got a big hole in one of the kids' bedrooms, and I'm just like, finally, it's like, I've got to get that sorted because the rain has been coming through. Anyway, I'm finally getting on it. But yes, it's not urgent, but actually now the rain's starting again, it is kind of becoming urgent. So these things do catch up with you. But yeah, it's just getting comfortable with the fact that we will always have stuff to do. And particularly if you want to achieve stuff in life and you want to continue to grow and expand, it's all part of it. And actually, again, it's sort of it's a big reframe. It's reframing that mindset. Actually, this is exciting. I've got stuff to do, and it's all in order for me to follow my passion, do what I want to do, follow my purpose. And I think the problem might be when you've got so much to do and actually it's all stuff you don't want to do and it feels heavy and it's not great. So if that's the case, if it's all feeling really draining and sapping the life out of you, then that's a real indication that really maybe things need to change. Because actually nowadays I'm very, 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 very happy to say that majority of stuff on my list are things which I love to do and fill me up. And okay, sometimes I'm a bit like, okay, I've got so much to do, and I've particularly had a very, recently, the last few months, I've had a particularly busy time, and there have been moments of me going, oh my God, I can't breathe, they've got too much on. But that was but I kept thinking to myself, this is just a very busy season. It was like 3 months I knew it was going to come to an end. And now I'm just coming to the end of that, and I feel I can kind of breathe again. And I'm very intentionally creating a bit of space for myself in the next couple of months to really sort of feel into, what's next. And that is really nice. That feels really good, because I do think, on that note, it is important as well to create space for nothingness, or not nothingness, but, not not being busy all of the time, so that because only then can we actually, decide and feel into what actually it is we want to do.
Completely. Yeah, no, it absolutely does. One other thing that you and I have talked about many times is mornings. And I hate to say it, but if you're feeling overwhelmed, then get up half an hour earlier. Because by starting your day in a good way and starting a day with just, you're talking about space. If you start your day with a bit of extra space in the morning before, life starts, then it can make such a huge difference. So if overwhelm is a really big problem for you, I would seriously consider getting up just half an hour earlier, just to give yourself that half an hour to even just to sit down and go, right, what do I need to get done today? So because we all have the same 24 hours in a day, it's how we use them and how we prioritize our time. But I think that is an easy win if you can just get your head around getting up a bit earlier. And I know this is incredibly hard. It's hard for me, and I'm sure it's hard for you, and both of us are, mainly early risers, but it really just, I cannot say enough about how much of a positive difference it makes to your life. So I would say consider that. The other thing is, you often, if you actually have a conversation with somebody, it can make you feel less overwhelmed, because when we allow things just to sort of whir around in our minds and we're not sort of expressing how we feel to anyone else, and this is kind of going back against what I said at the beginning, which is don't talk about it too much, but that doesn't mean that it isn't a good idea to have a conversation with somebody, because often someone else, like for example, I'm sure that you and I have both talked to each other and gone, oh my god, but often a conversation with somebody they will be seeing it from a completely objective point of view, and they will be able to help you just go, well, look, you don't need to worry about that, and sometimes discussing it in a kind of calm manner with a friend can help you get things straight in your own head and work out what you need to prioritize.
Absolutely. I mean, this is, absolutely. And this is what I've been helping, some of my clients do, with helping them manage this feeling of overwhelm, and actually giving them some tools and techniques to help them feel much calmer and more organized. I think, it's like anything, isn't it? When you have someone else's perspective on it, it can really it's almost like reflecting back to you of where you're at. Yeah. And just kind of gives you that sort of sense of clarity, and actually it's okay, it's all right. Because I think, overwhelm is one of those horrible feelings where it's very difficult to kind of talk yourself out, get yourself out of it, because you just kind of spiral downwards into that sort of pit of, it's a very anxiety kind of driven feeling, isn't it? Overwhelm.
It really is. Polly, what sort of can you perhaps share a couple of like practical tips that you give to your clients about how to deal with overwhelm?
Well, breathe. I mean, really, with what you've said, I mean, in terms of, I always recommend people to do things in the morning to really set themselves up for the day, to give themselves that space, move your body, get outside, go for a walk. And that at the time seems so counterintuitive, because when you're overwhelmed, you're thinking, I've just got to do it. I've got to do. But actually, the best possible thing you can do is actually give yourself some space to be able to breathe, some clarity, get outside, get some fresh air, move your body, move that energy through you, shake your body, because you've got so much going on which just needs to kind of be outed. It's kind of like releasing that stress and that energy. So it really is about trying to release that energy, but also at the same time getting calm, so you've kind of got some clarity. But my other big tip really is to write everything down, and just into small steps, and so that you can actually see, because I think when you can actually see it on paper, it's not so overwhelming, because you can start to gradually cross things off, and you can see what you need to do next. So you can write everything down. I like doing things under different headings. Personally, that's me, in terms of the different sections of my life, work, money, health, whatever it might be. And then you can actually, if you're really geeky, you can color code them, in terms of priorities. And you can then, but if part of that, you really do need to know what your values are, and you need to know what your priorities are. That is really important, because as we said, if you've got a whole list of things on there which drain you, then something's really amiss, and it's going to be very different, to remove that feeling of overwhelm. But also, just accept that you're going to, if you're busy, it's fine to be busy, and accept that list is always going to be there. And celebrate, just at the, I do think at the end of the day, and I'm getting better at this, is, set yourself a little task of how many things you want to get done, and then once they're done, shut the laptop, do something else, and do something you really want to do. But if you love what you do, then fine. If you've got more time, then do some more things. But I think you've got this, and I'm learning on this as well, because sometimes I obviously have kids, and sometimes, I've got to go make them dinner and stuff like that. But sometimes I'm a bit like, oh, but I just want to do this one other thing, but actually I'm learning to go, nope, that can wait. I can do that tomorrow.
Yeah, funny enough, I'm learning myself to do that same thing, which I find incredibly hard. And, I don't have kids, so I don't have to, thankfully, cook anyone's supper, apart from myself. No offense. But no, the reason I say that is because I can very, very easily spend all evening sat at my desk, because there is always something else to do. So I can very easily work a lot of nights of my life up until the point where I'm like, oh, it's bedtime. And I've spent the entire evening working again. But I am trying to, like you just say, have a kind of a switch off point where I'm like, Lucy, it's equally as important that you have some downtime as it is that you get that thing done. And actually, just going back to what you were saying about, getting outside and moving and exercising and breath work and meditation and all of those things, whilst, like you so rightly said, it can seem counterintuitive when you're feeling massively overwhelmed. It's like, well, I don't have time to go for a run, or I don't have time to go for a walk. But actually, the truth is that by prioritizing those things in your life, such as getting a really good night's sleep, getting outside in nature, moving your body, and doing some meditation, doing some breath work, if you prioritize those kind of quote unquote wellness things in your daily life, then the whole point that we do those things is because they have a massive knock-on effect to the rest of our life. So we've got to look at the bigger picture, if you like, and force ourselves to take the time to do those things that it does seem counterintuitive, because we're so busy, we've got so much to do, so how the hell can we sit down and meditate for 15 minutes? But if we're consistent with those kinds of routines, then you will see that they have a positive effect on your entire life, which subsequently includes how overwhelmed you feel and how well you deal with overwhelm. Because when you're prioritizing things like spending time in nature, getting exercise, meditating, doing breath work, journaling, whatever it is, you'll find that you probably don't feel so overwhelmed, or you deal with it in a much more constructive way.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, because there's always going to be this sense of busyness and lots of things to do, but it's what our capacity is in order to be able to deal with it. And all of those wellness tools which you mentioned are all there to build your bandwidth, to build your capacity in order to cope. Because if you have a busy life, you have a busy life, and it's because you probably want to grow and expand and do all the wonderful things. So it is about building that bandwidth so that you have that capacity to take it on and not feel that sense of overwhelm. So yeah.
Completely. Well, we are bang on the money at 09:30.
Yay!
Pleasure as always.
Yes, thanks, Lucy.
Later.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Okay, thank you for everyone who has joined and listened. Hopefully something in here which has been helpful. So yeah, we'll see you next time.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye guys. Bye.